The community garden shimmered under the afternoon sun, its rows of vegetables stretching across what had once been an abandoned lot in the city's forgotten district. Maya Chin knelt in the soil, her fingers working through the earth with practiced ease, demonstrating companion planting techniques to a cluster of teenagers whose attention wavered between her instructions and their neural interfaces. The devices pulsed softly at their temples, a constant reminder of the world beyond this patch of green. Tomatoes and basil, Maya said, pressing a seedling into the ground. They protect each other. The basil repels pests that would destroy the tomato. The tomato provides shade that keeps the basil from wilting in summer heat. Symbiosis, a girl with purple streaked hair and an outdated interface model looked up from her handheld screen. Ms. Chen, why do you do this? I mean, you went to Stanford. You could be making real money. My mom says people with degrees like yours pull in $500,000 a year minimum. Maya sat back on her heels, wiping dirt across her faded jeans. The jade bracelet on her wrist caught the light, its surface smooth from years of wear. Money is a tool, Jasmine. Purpose is a life. I choose to build lives. The teenagers exchanged glances, the kind of look that suggested they'd mentally categorized her response as another example of adult evasion. Maya didn't mind. She'd learned long ago that some lessons couldn't be taught. Only lived. Her studio apartment welcomed her with its familiar spareness 2 hours later. The space was clean but minimal, a single room where her bed folded into the wall and her kitchen consisted of a compact unit that synthesized basic meals. No holoscreen dominated the living area like in most modern homes. No smart surfaces responded to her presence. Just secondhand furniture, plants on the windowsill, and shelves lined with actual books, their physical presence an anomaly in an age of digital consumption. Maya pulled up her workshop financials on her ancient tablet, the device's cracked screen flickering as it loaded. The numbers told their usual story, barely breaking even. She'd cleared $300 profit this month after covering materials, utilities for the garden space, and the small stipend she paid her teenage assistants. Enough to survive. Not enough to impress anyone who measured success in credit scores and social capital ratings. Her phone buzzed, the vibration harsh against the table's wooden surface. A group message illuminated the screen, her sister's name at the top of the thread. Mother's 60th birthday gala, Saturday 7 p.m., dress code, black tie. Try to look presentable, Maya. Please. Maya stared at the message, then at her closet where her wardrobe consisted of work clothes, casual clothes, and one simple dress she'd bought secondhand 3 years ago. The dress was sage green linen, elegant in its simplicity, utterly inappropriate for the kind of event her family attended. She could already picture Vivian's expression, that particular tightening around her eyes that telegraphed disappointment wrapped in concern. She set the phone down without responding. Across the city, in a glass tower that pierced the skyline like a crystalline blade, Vivian Chen stood in her corner office and watched the sun set over the sprawl below. Her neural interface projected holographic documents around her in a semicircle, contracts and briefs floating in her peripheral vision, awaiting her attention. She swiped through them with practiced efficiency while her phone transmitted voice commands to her assistant 3 floors down. Confirm the seating arrangements. Mother at the head table, Marcus and his wife to her right, myself and Jonathan to her left. And make sure Maya is somewhere visible but not prominent. Last thing we need is Mother's friends asking why the youngest Chen is dressed like she's going hiking. Her husband's voice came through her interface, a private channel that bypassed the office systems. You're being harsh, Viv. I'm being realistic. You didn't see what she wore to Marcus's wedding. Actual cotton. Like she'd raided a museum. Vivian closed the contracts with a gesture, the holograms dissolving into light. Mother's friends are investors, board members, people with actual influence. Maya shows up looking like a community college dropout. It reflects on all of us. Jonathan didn't respond, which meant he disagreed but knew better than to argue. Vivian appreciated that about him. He understood the game. She pulled up a different screen, this one showing their family's social capital index. The Chen family rated in the 97th percentile, their combined wealth, influence, and public perception creating a score that opened doors most people didn't even know existed. Vivian's own contribution sat at 94%, her legal career and carefully curated public persona adding substantial value to the family brand. Maya's profile showed a flat line. 32nd percentile. Barely above poverty level. A drag on the family average that Vivian had spent years trying to offset through her own achievements. The worst part was that Maya had actually been promising once. Stanford MBA, top of her class, offers from every major consulting firm. Then their father had died, and Maya had lost her mind. Quit her job, moved to that awful neighborhood, started teaching gardening like some kind of 20th century hippie. 5 years of watching her brilliant sister waste her potential on people who would never appreciate it. Vivian closed the social capital screen and opened her messages, typing quickly, "Maya better not embarrass us. Mother's friends will be there. Can you imagine if she shows up in one of her thrift store outfits?" Marcus responded within seconds, his message accompanied by a photo of a sleek silver Porsche, the third one he'd purchased this year. "Maybe we should take up a collection, buy her something decent to wear." It's getting sad. Vivian didn't smile at the joke. It was sad. Tragically, frustratingly sad. The Chen estate sprawled across 2 acres of prime real estate, its grounds maintained by a small army of automated systems and human gardeners who knew better than to leave a single blade of grass out of place. Elizabeth Chen stood in her dressing room, surrounded by gowns that cost more than most people earned in a year, and studied the holographic projection of her youngest daughter. The image showed Maya at 22, graduation day at Stanford, her smile bright and genuine as she held her diploma. Elizabeth remembered that day with painful clarity. How proud Richard had been. How he'd pulled Maya aside and told her she could do anything, be anything, that her mind was a gift she should use however she saw fit. Richard had always understood Maya in ways Elizabeth couldn't. He'd seen something in their youngest daughter, some quality that transcended the metrics by which the rest of the world measured success. Elizabeth had tried to understand it too, had tried to see what her husband saw, but all she could see now was waste. Brilliant, heartbreaking waste. She dismissed the hologram and selected a gown for the gala, midnight blue with embedded light filaments that would pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. The dress cost 80,000 credits. Maya probably lived on less than that in a year. Elizabeth's interface chimed softly, a reminder about the evening speaker. David Park, founder and CEO of Green Future Technologies, the man who'd revolutionized urban agriculture and sustainable food systems. His company's valuation had hit $3 billion last quarter. His social capital rating exceeded 99%. The kind of man who could name his price, choose his associates, shape the future through sheer force of vision and resources. Elizabeth had met him twice at charity functions. He was charming, brilliant, exactly the kind of person she'd hoped Maya would become. Instead, Maya had chosen dirt and teenagers and nonprofit work that barely kept her lights on. The invitation to speak at the gala had been a coup, secured through connections Elizabeth had cultivated over decades. Having David Park at her birthday celebration elevated the entire event, transformed it from merely expensive to genuinely significant. Everyone who mattered would be there, including Maya, who would probably show up looking like she'd just finished weeding someone's backyard. Elizabeth closed her eyes and tried to hear Richard's voice. The way he'd defended their youngest daughter. Maya understands what matters. You'll all see one day. 5 years later, Elizabeth still didn't see it. The Green Future Technologies headquarters occupied the top 15 floors of the Nexus Tower, its walls made of smart glass that adjusted opacity and tint based on the sun's position. David Park stood in the executive conference room, surrounded by his board members, and tried to focus on the quarterly projections being presented. His mind kept drifting to Saturday night. David? Jennifer Koh, his co-founder and chief technology officer, waved a hand in front of his face. "You're doing it again." The board members shifted in their seats. Some amused, others irritated. David had a reputation for absolute focus during meetings, the kind of CEO who caught every detail and remembered every number. His distraction was unusual enough to be noteworthy. "Sorry," David said, pulling his attention back to the holographic displays. "Continue," but Jennifer had already dismissed the projections with a gesture. "We're done anyway. Numbers are good. Stock's up. Everything's tracking." Meeting adjourned, the board filed out, leaving Jennifer alone with David. She settled into the chair across from him, her expression a mix of amusement and exasperation. "The Chin Gala is Saturday," she said. "I'm aware. Will she be there?" David didn't pretend to misunderstand. "According to the guest list, yes. And you think this time will be different?" "No. But I'm stubborn." Jennifer laughed, sharp and genuine. "David, you're a billionaire. You could have any person you want. Models, celebrities, people who would actually say yes. Why are you torturing yourself over a woman who's turned you down for 3 years straight?" David stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. Somewhere in that sprawl, Maya was probably teaching someone to grow vegetables, getting her hands dirty, completely unaware of or unconcerned by the empire he'd built partially in hopes of impressing her, because she's worth waiting for. He said quietly. Jennifer joined him at the window. "You know she's going to say no again. She always does, probably, so why keep trying?" David pulled up a photo on his interface, projecting it so Jennifer could see. Maya in the community garden, kneeling in the soil, laughing at something one of the teenagers had said. She looked completely at peace, completely herself, unaware that David had been watching from across the street, too cowardly to approach. "She gave me everything," David said. 10 years ago, when I was nobody, when I had nothing but an idea and desperation, she shared her lunch with me. Sat with me for hours. Showed me her research, years of work, and just gave it to me. No contracts, no equity demands, no conditions. Just believed in me and told me to grow something beautiful." Jennifer had heard this story before, but she listened anyway. She understood what Maya Chen meant to David, even if she thought he was being irrational about it. "I begged her to be my co-founder," David continued. "Told her the ideas were hers, that she deserved to build this with me. You know what she said, ideas are worthless unless they're planted," Jennifer recited. "And then she told you to do it yourself while she grew something different. I forced equity on her anyway. 15%. Had the lawyers draw it up before she could object, made it retroactive to day one. She tried to refuse it, but I'd already filed the paperwork." David closed the photo. "That was 10 years ago. She's never touched a penny of it. Lives on workshop income. Drives a car older than some of her students. Wears clothes that cost less than the coffee in our break room, while sitting on a fortune worth almost $500 million, Jennifer said softly. "She doesn't care about the money. That's why she's worth it." Jennifer studied her oldest friend, the man who'd clawed his way from nothing to reshape an industry. "You're going to tell them Saturday night. I'm tired of watching her family treat her like she's worthless." "David, she chose privacy for a reason. If you expose this, you take that choice away from her." "I know." David's jaw tightened. "But I can't watch it anymore, Jen. The way they look at her, the way they talk about her like she's failed at life. She's done more good in 5 years than most people do in a lifetime, and they treat her like she's an embarrassment. So you're going to blow up her cover to prove a point." "I'm going to tell the truth. What happens after that is up to her." Jennifer sighed and headed for the door. At the threshold, she paused. For what it's worth, I hope she finally says yes. You've been insufferable for 3 years. I'd like to see what you're like when you're actually happy, David smiled. Thanks, Jen, don't thank me. I still think you're an idiot. But you're my idiot. After she left, David returned to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Maya was living the life she'd chosen, true to values that most people had abandoned or never possessed in the first place. In 2 days, he'd see her again. In 2 days, he'd tell her family exactly who she was and what she'd accomplished, and maybe, finally, she'd understand that he'd been serious all along. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, the kind of crystalline evening that made the city's towers glow like monuments to human ambition. Maya stood in her apartment, looking at the sage green dress laid out on her bed, and wondered if she could claim sudden illness. Food poisoning, maybe. Neural interface malfunction. Acute allergy to pretension. Her phone buzzed. Her mother, the third message of the day, looking forward to seeing you tonight, sweetheart. The car service can pick you up if you need it. Translation: please don't arrive in your ancient Honda. Maya dressed carefully, braiding her hair, clasping the jade bracelet around her wrist. The bracelet had been a gift from someone who understood her, who saw value in beauty without ostentation. She wore it always, a reminder that not everyone measured worth in credits and social capital scores. The Uber arrived at 6:30. Maya climbed into the back seat. Watching the city transform as they drove from her neighborhood to the district where her mother lived. The buildings grew taller, the streets cleaner, the people better dressed. Neural interfaces became more sophisticated, their designs subtle and expensive rather than obvious and functional. By the time they reached the hotel, Maya felt like she'd traveled to a different world. The ballroom was a cathedral of wealth, all crystal chandeliers and ice sculptures and champagne towers that sparkled under programmed lighting. Guests circulated in designer gowns and tailored suits, their interfaces creating subtle halos of light as they exchanged business cards and social capital transfers. The air hummed with ambient music and the murmur of people who believed themselves important. Maya stepped inside and felt every eye in the room assess and dismiss her. Her sister spotted her first. Vivian wore midnight blue with light filaments that pulsed in complex patterns, her hair styled into an elaborate updo that probably required professional help. She crossed the room with her husband in tow, her smile fixed in place. Maya. Vivian's embrace was brief, more performance than affection. You came, of course I came. It's Mom's birthday, yes, well. Vivian's gaze traveled over Maya's dress, the simple braid, the complete absence of neural interface or smart jewelry. You look natural. Jonathan, Vivian's husband, smiled more genuinely. Good to see you, Maya. How's the garden? Thriving. We just expanded into the lot next door. That's wonderful, Jonathan said, but Vivian was already looking past them, scanning the room. Marcus approached next, his wife draped on his arm like an accessory. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Maya's annual food budget, its fabric embedded with technology that adjusted temperature and repelled stains. Maya. Marcus's concern was entirely fake, his smile sharp with mockery. You made it. We were worried you'd get lost. Does your phone have GPS or is that too corporate for you? His wife and several nearby guests laughed. Maya smiled serenely. I found it fine, Marcus. Same way I always find what matters. The barb landed, but Marcus brushed it off. He perfected the art of hearing only what he wanted to hear. Elizabeth emerged from a cluster of guests, resplendent in her midnight gown, looking every inch the society matriarch. She embraced Maya, and this time the affection was real, even if it came wrapped in disappointment. Sweetheart, you look lovely. Very, you. Elizabeth's fingers touched Maya's braid, then dropped. I wish you'd let me send you shopping. All my friends are here tonight, I'm comfortable, Mom. Isn't that what matters? Elizabeth's expression answered before her mouth could form the polite lie. The evening proceeded with ritualistic precision. Cocktail hour became an endurance test as Maya circulated through the room, enduring comments that started as curiosity and evolved into judgment. Vivian's husband cornered her near the champagne fountain, his smile friendly but his words cutting. So Maya, still playing in the dirt? When are you going to use that Stanford MBA? Seems like a waste of your father's money. Maya kept her voice calm. Education isn't wasted when you use it to educate others. Sure. He waved a hand, dismissive. But I mean real education. Teaching actual skills people can use to succeed. A hedge fund manager joined them, her interface projecting financial data that scrolled across her vision even as she conversed. Community gardens, right? That's your thing? That's sweet. Like a hobby. But what do you do for actual income? I teach sustainable living. People pay for my workshops. The woman's expression managed to be both pitying and amused. How much can that possibly make? 20,000-30,000 a year. Marcus materialized at Maya's elbow, his laugh loud enough to draw attention from nearby clusters. If she's lucky. Maya, seriously, I can get you an entry-level position at one of my firms. Administrative work. It's not too late to start a real career. Dinner arrived with the precision of a military operation, servers in crisp uniforms delivering courses that had been molecular gastronomy reconstructed into art. Maya sat between her siblings at the family table, watching her mother preside from the head like a queen addressing her court. The attacks had been warming up during cocktail hour. Now, fortified by champagne and the safety of their assigned seats, her family's mockery sharpened into something more deliberate. Vivian's voice carried to nearby tables, her volume carefully calibrated to seem accidental. Maya, are you still in that apartment with the broken air conditioning? Marcus mentioned it last week. In this heat? We're family. Why won't you let us help you? Maya cut into her deconstructed salmon, watching the foam separate from the crisp. The AC works fine, does it? Marcus leaned forward, his interface creating a subtle glow around his temple as he pulled up data. I checked the building records. System's 20 years old. You know I've offered to set you up in one of my properties. Below market rent. Family discount, she's proud, Vivian's husband said, swirling wine in his glass. The light filaments in his suit pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, a display of wealth so casual it became aggressive. That's the issue. Pride doesn't cool you down in August, Vivian added. What are you trying to prove, Maya? Aunt Susan, Elizabeth's sister, set down her fork with a soft clink that somehow demanded attention. Her neural interface was top of the line, nearly invisible except for the faint shimmer at her temples. I remember when you were going places. Stanford, that big consulting firm, what was it called? Bain? McKinsey? What happened? Did you have some kind of breakdown? Elizabeth flinched but said nothing. Maya watched her mother's hands tighten around her silverware, watched her mouth open and close without producing sound. The silence stretched long enough to become its own answer. Marcus filled the void with practiced ease. She found meaning. The sarcasm dripped like acid. Teaching kids to grow tomatoes. Very meaningful. Very profitable. Really making a difference in the world. Cousin Derek, an investment banker whose social capital rating hovered in the 95th percentile, leaned across the table with what he probably thought was genuine concern. No offense, Maya, but don't you ever want more? A nice car? Vacations to places that aren't community gardens? Designer clothes that don't look like they've been through a thrift store cycle? You're 34. Isn't it exhausting pretending you don't want what everyone wants? Maya set down her fork with deliberate care. The jade bracelet caught the light as she moved, its surface gleaming against her wrist. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm enough to cut through the ambient noise of the ballroom. I have everything I want. I wake up excited for my day. I help people learn to sustain themselves. I build community. I sleep peacefully at night. How many people at this table can say that? The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Nearby tables had gone quiet, guests pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. Maya watched her family's faces cycle through reactions. Vivian's expression tightened, her interface flickering as she received messages from colleagues who were undoubtedly watching this play out in real time. Marcus's jaw clenched, his hand gripping his champagne glass hard enough that Maya wondered if it might shatter. Vivian recovered first, her training as a lawyer allowing her to pivot with practiced grace. Community is wonderful, Maya. Nobody's saying it isn't. But you can have community and success. You don't have to choose poverty to have values. That's just a martyr complex disguised as principles. Marcus seized the opening. Exactly. Dad left you inheritance money, same as us. You could invest it, grow it, secure your future. Instead you what, donate it all to charity? Live like a monk? It's not noble, Maya. It's naive. What happens when you're 60 and you have nothing? You think those teenagers you teach are going to take care of you. Maya's expression finally hardened, her composure cracking just enough to show the steel underneath. You have no idea what I do with my money. We know you barely have any, Vivian shot back. You drive a 15-year-old Honda that sounds like it's dying every time you start it. You share a community garden plot like you're in college. You can't even afford a decent dress. She gestured at Maya's sage green linen. No offense, but that looks like it came from Target. It did, Maya said evenly. The table erupted in barely suppressed laughter, the kind that started as throat clearing and evolved into genuine amusement. Vivian's husband shook his head, smiling like he'd just heard a particularly good joke. Marcus exchanged glances with his wife, their interfaces syncing automatically to share the moment across their social networks. Even some of the nearby guests laughed, polite chuckles that acknowledged they'd witnessed something entertaining. Elizabeth finally spoke, her voice carrying the exhausted authority of someone who'd refereed too many family conflicts. Enough. All of you. Maya makes her choices. We may not understand them, but, she trailed off, unable to complete the defense. Maya watched her mother struggle, watched her search for words that would bridge the gap between disappointment and love, and come up empty. The silence said more than any completed sentence could have. A microphone tapped somewhere near the stage, the sound amplified through the ballroom's acoustic systems. The MC's voice cut through the ambient conversation with professional smoothness. Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to have with us tonight one of the tech world's most visionary leaders. His company, Green Future Technologies, has revolutionized urban agriculture and sustainable food systems globally. Please welcome David Park. Applause erupted across the ballroom, genuine and enthusiastic. Maya watched her family's expressions transform, watched them sit up straighter, adjust their interfaces to record the moment, prepare to be impressed by real success. David crossed the stage with easy confidence, his suit probably worth more than Maya's annual income, his presence commanding attention without demanding it. Vivian leaned close to Maya, her whisper pitched just loud enough to carry. Now this is success. Take notes, Marcus nodded, his interface already pulling up Green Future's stock price. His company's worth billions. 3.2 billion at last valuation. That's what happens when you don't waste your potential on hobbies. Maya said nothing, but her hand moved unconsciously to the jade bracelet, her fingers tracing its smooth surface. She watched David reach the podium, watched him scan the crowd until his eyes found hers. Something in his expression made her chest tighten. David's voice filled the ballroom, amplified and clear. "Thank you, Elizabeth, for having me. I'm here tonight to honor someone special. Someone who changed my life 10 years ago." The audience leaned forward collectively, the rustle of expensive fabric and the soft glow of interfaces creating an atmosphere of anticipation. Maya's pulse quickened. She knew that tone in David's voice, had heard it before in their private conversations when he was building up to something she wouldn't like. 10 years ago, I was nobody, David continued. Broke, directionless, sleeping on a friend's couch. I had an idea but no confidence, no resources, no belief in myself. I was about ready to give up and take a corporate job just to pay rent. He paused, and his eyes found Maya again. This time he didn't look away. Then I met someone at a community center. She shared her lunch with me, just a simple sandwich. Nothing fancy. But it was the first time in weeks someone had shown me kindness without wanting something in return. Without checking my social capital rating. Without judging me based on my interface model or my clothes or my prospects. The Chin family was listening now, their attention caught by the story. Maya watched Vivian's brow furrow slightly, watched Marcus's expression shift from boredom to confusion. They hadn't connected the dots yet. We talked for hours, David said, his voice growing warmer with memory. She told me about her vision. Sustainable vertical farms that could fit in urban environments. Hydroponic systems that could feed entire communities. Food security driven by local participation rather than corporate supply chains. She showed me years of research, detailed plans, feasibility studies. Work that represented thousands of hours and a level of insight I'd never encountered. He smiled, and the expression transformed his face from handsome to devastating. I asked her to be my co-founder. Begged her, actually. Told her we could build this together, change the world together. You know what she said? The ballroom was completely silent now. Even the servers had stopped moving. She refused. Said I needed to do it myself. That I had to prove I could build something without her carrying the weight. But she believed in me. His voice caught slightly. She gave me everything. All her research, all her notes. All her innovations. Years of work. And she asked for nothing. Refused equity. Refused payment. Refused even to have her name attached to any of it. Confused murmurs rippled through the audience. Maya felt Vivian stiffen beside her, felt her sister's attention sharpen into focus. Across the table, Marcus had gone very still, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his mouth. David continued, his words landing like precision strikes. I begged her to reconsider. Told her that her ideas were worth millions, that she deserved to benefit from her own genius. You know what she said? He addressed the whole room now, but Maya knew every word was for her family. She said, ideas are worthless unless they're planted. Go grow something beautiful, David. I'll grow something different. The murmurs grew louder. People were starting to calculate, starting to piece together implications. Maya watched her mother's face drain of color, watched understanding dawn like a slow sunrise. So I did, David said. I built green future technologies on the foundation she laid. Every patent we hold, every innovation we've brought to market, every success we've achieved, it started with her vision. Her research. Her willingness to give freely what most people would have hoarded. Vivian's whisper was urgent, almost desperate. Is he talking about Maya? Marcus looked pale under the ballroom lights. He couldn't be, but David was already confirming their worst fears. She didn't want fame or credit. She wanted to keep working directly with communities, teaching people sustainable living, getting her hands dirty, as she puts it, with real people. Real impact. She valued substance over image. Purpose over profit. Impact over status. The room was absolutely silent now, every eye locked on David, every ear straining to catch his next words, but I insisted she accept founding advisor equity. 15%. I forced the paperwork through before she could object. Made it retroactive to day one, had lawyers structure it so she couldn't refuse without suing me. That was 10 years ago. He let that sink in, watching the crowd process the timeline. Green Future Technologies went public 3 months ago. Our current valuation, as of market close yesterday, is $3.2 billion. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave. Math-inclined guests were already calculating, their interfaces lighting up as they ran numbers. Maya heard someone at a nearby table whisper, "Oh my God," with genuine shock. Elizabeth gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white against the dark wood. Vivian looked like someone had punched her in the stomach. Her mouth open, her interface flickering wildly as messages flooded in from colleagues and friends. Marcus was completely frozen, his expression cycling between shock and something that might have been horror. David's voice cut through the shocked murmurs with casual precision. 15% of $3.2 billion is $480 million. The ballroom erupted in noise, conversations exploding across every table, interfaces lighting up as people shared the revelation across their networks. Maya sat perfectly still, feeling 300 pairs of eyes turned toward her, feeling the weight of attention she'd spent 10 years avoiding. David wasn't finished. His voice rose above the chaos, commanding silence through sheer force of presence. But here's what you need to understand about this remarkable woman. She's lived on her workshop income alone, maybe $30,000 a year, while sitting on a fortune. She hasn't touched a penny of her equity for herself. Not for a nicer apartment. Not for a car. Not for designer clothes or neural interface upgrades or social capital investments. His voice grew passionate now, losing some of its professional polish and gaining something more raw. Instead, she's quietly funded literacy programs in 12 cities. Women's shelters in 8 states. Urban farms in 30 communities across 3 continents. She sent 53 kids to college, kids who couldn't get traditional scholarships, who the system had written off. She's provided seed funding for 24 social enterprises run by people of color who couldn't get traditional venture capital. She's donated over $300 million in 10 years, and insisted it all be anonymous. No credit. No tax breaks. No social capital gains. Just impact. Camera operators were scrambling now, finding Maya in the crowd. She felt the hot eye of attention focus on her, felt tears threaten behind her eyes. She kept her face composed through years of practice, but her hands trembled slightly where they rested on the table. David stepped away from the podium, moving to the edge of the stage. She is the wisest investor I know. Not because she knows markets or hedge funds or algorithmic trading, but because she invests in people. In potential. In dignity. She sees wealth not as something to hoard or display or use to elevate herself above others. She sees it as a tool to build the world she wants to live in. He looked directly at Maya, and the intimacy of his gaze felt like a physical touch across the distance. Maya Chen is my silent partner. My inspiration. The reason Green Future exists. And for 3 years, I've been trying to convince her to let me take her to dinner. The audience laughed, the sound releasing some of the tension that had built in the room. Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks, felt the blush she'd been fighting break through her composure. She keeps saying no, David continued, a smile playing at his lips. Says I'm too corporate for her. That my suits are unnecessarily expensive. That I've lost touch with what matters. More laughter rippled through the crowd. But I'm stubborn. And tonight, in front of all these witnesses, I'm asking again. He locked eyes with her across the ballroom. Maya, will you finally let me take you to that taco truck you keep recommending? I promise I'll pay. Even though technically half the money is yours, The room erupted in applause and delighted gasps, the sound building like a wave. Every eye turned to Maya. The spotlight found her at the Chen family table where her siblings looked devastated, where her mother was crying tears that might have been shock or pride or shame or all three mixed together. Maya stood slowly, feeling her body move through muscle memory while her mind reeled. She walked toward the stage, the crowd parting for her like water, their eyes tracking her progress. David met her halfway, descending from the stage to stand on her level, and the gesture felt significant in ways she couldn't articulate. They stood face to face, close enough that she could see the nervous tension in his shoulders, could feel the heat radiating from his body. The chemistry between them was undeniable. Had been undeniable for 3 years, and now it was on display for 300 people and however many thousands were watching through their interfaces. You couldn't just call? Maya asked softly, but she was smiling despite herself. You wouldn't have answered. His voice was low, intimate despite the crowd pressing close. Besides, I was tired of watching your family treat you like you were less than them. Like your choices made you a failure. You just made this so much more complicated. Good. His smile was slight but genuine. Complicated means you can't ignore me anymore. Can't pretend you don't see what's between us. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against her skin. His thumb brushing over the jade bracelet with deliberate significance. I've been patient, Maya. 3 years. But watching them mock you tonight, belittle you, treat your choices like failures when you've accomplished more than any of them will in their lifetimes. His voice dropped even lower, rough with emotion. It took everything in me not to interrupt dinner and tell them the truth then and there. This was my choice, David. My privacy. You took that from me, I know. His eyes were intense, burning with something that made her breath catch. I respect that I violated your trust. But they don't get to disrespect you. Not on my watch. Not anymore. I'm done watching you take their abuse in silence. The audience was eating this up, Maya realized distantly. It was better than any movie, any drama their interfaces could stream. Real emotion, real tension, real stakes playing out in real time. The bracelet, she whispered, needing to say something that felt true. You never told me what it cost, because you would have refused it. His smile turned rueful. It's Song Dynasty jade. Priceless, according to the appraiser I consulted. But I knew you'd only wear it if you thought it had meaning rather than value, if you thought it was just a trinket from a street market. His thumb traced the jade's surface. So I told you it reminded me of your eyes. Which was true. The color shifts in different light. Just like yours do, she laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. You're impossible. Is that a yes to dinner? She pretended to consider, drawing out the moment partly from habit and partly because she needed time to process everything that had just happened. It's a maybe. Impress me first. I just publicly declared my admiration for you in front of 300 people and exposed your secret in the process. How's that for impressive? It's a start. Her eyes sparkled with challenge, falling into the familiar pattern of their banter. But you also violated my privacy and made my life significantly more complicated. So we're basically even. He leaned in slightly, not enough to be inappropriate given their audience, but enough that everyone watching felt the heat between them. What if I told you I've been in love with you since that first sandwich? That every decision I've made for 10 years has been partly hoping you'd notice? That I built an empire just to be worthy of you? The crowd collectively held its breath. Maya felt her own breathing stop, felt the sincerity in his words hit her like a physical force. Her expression softened, her defenses crumbling under the weight of his honesty. David, that's still not a yes, he said with a slight smile. But I'll take it as progress. Before she could respond, applause thundered through the room, the sound deafening. David offered his arm. The gesture old-fashioned and somehow perfect. Walk back with me? I'm not done with my speech. I have some awards to present. Awards? Maya's voice was unsteady, for the woman who's changed thousands of lives. Including mine. Maya took David's arm and let him guide her back to the stage, her legs moving through some autopilot function while her mind struggled to process what had just happened. Behind her, she could feel the weight of 300 stares, could hear the whispered conversations erupting across the ballroom like wildfire. At the Chin family table, Vivian had her head in her hands, her interface flickering wildly as messages flooded in. Marcus looked physically ill, his face pale under the programmed lighting. Elizabeth was crying openly, tears streaming down her face in a way that smudged her carefully applied makeup. David's hand was warm and steady on hers, grounding her as they climbed the stage steps. He positioned her slightly behind the podium, close enough to be included but giving him space to continue. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression composed, years of practice allowing her to maintain control even as everything inside her screamed. David's voice filled the ballroom again, and the crowd fell silent with almost desperate attention. Green Future Technologies has established the Maya Chin Foundation for Community Sustainability. Initial funding is $100 million. Maya will direct it as she sees fit, which means it will actually change lives rather than just generate tax breaks and good publicity. Maya's head snapped toward him, her composure finally cracking. David, you can't, it's done. His grin was unrepentant, boyish in a way that made him look younger despite the expensive suit. The board already voted. Unanimous decision. Even Jennifer voted yes, and she thinks I'm an idiot for chasing you this long. The crowd laughed, the sound releasing tension and building goodwill. Maya felt tears threaten behind her eyes, felt the weight of the gift and what it represented pressing against her chest. David continued, his voice taking on a softer quality. We're also renaming our flagship urban farm initiative the Chen Legacy Project, in honor of Maya's father, who supported her choices when no one else did. Who understood that success isn't measured in social capital ratings or net worth, but in the lives you touch and the world you leave behind. The tears spilled over then, hot against Maya's cheeks. Her father's memory, honored publicly in front of everyone who had doubted her, everyone who had pitted her, everyone who had assumed she'd wasted his investment in her education. The grief she'd been carrying for 5 years broke through her careful walls, and she didn't bother trying to stop it. David turned to her, and in front of 300 witnesses and countless more watching through their interfaces, he gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was intimate, tender, and the crowd sighed collectively at the romance of it. He was right, David said softly, his words meant for her but amplified across the ballroom. You do understand what matters. And they're all seeing it now. Finally, the applause that followed was thunderous, people rising from their seats in a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. Maya stood beside David, his hand finding hers again, and let herself feel the validation she'd never admitted she needed. Not the money, not the recognition of her wealth, but the acknowledgement that her choices had meant something. That her father had been right to support her. That she hadn't been naive or foolish or wasting her potential. When the applause finally died down, David concluded his speech with thanks to Elizabeth for hosting and wishes for her continued health. Then he escorted Maya off the stage, his hand never leaving the small of her back, protective and possessive in equal measure. The ballroom transformed into controlled chaos. Guests swarmed toward Maya, their interfaces recording every interaction, their social capital algorithms calculating the value of proximity to the evening's revelation. Maya found herself shaking hands, accepting congratulations, fielding questions she wasn't prepared to answer. David stayed close, running interference when people got too aggressive, his presence a shield against the worst of the attention. Through the crowd, Maya saw her family approaching. They moved slowly, cautiously, like people approaching something that might explode. Vivian's eyes were red and swollen from crying. Marcus looked like he'd aged a decade in the span of an hour. Elizabeth walked between them, her elegant composure shattered into something raw and uncertain. David squeezed Maya's hand once, then stepped back slightly, giving them space but remaining close enough to intervene if needed. Maya appreciated the gesture more than she could articulate. Elizabeth reached her first, her voice breaking over the words. "Maya, sweetheart, I didn't know." Maya's voice came out gentler than she'd expected. The anger she'd been carrying for years somehow diminished by seeing her mother's genuine distress. "I know, Mom. I chose not to tell you, but why?" Elizabeth's hands fluttered, uncertain where to land. "All this time, we were worried about you. Your apartment, your car, your clothes. We thought you were struggling. We thought you needed help. Were you worried?" Maya asked, and though her tone wasn't accusatory, the question landed like a blade. "Or were you embarrassed?" "There's a difference." Elizabeth opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No answer came. The silence stretched long enough to become its own condemnation. Vivian stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Her carefully cultivated lawyer's composure completely demolished. "Maya, I'm so sorry. The things I said tonight. God, the things we'd been saying for years." Her voice broke completely. "I called your life sad. I mocked your apartment. I treated you like you were a failure." Marcus looked physically ill, his interface dark for perhaps the first time in years. "I offered you entry-level positions. Administrative work. I laughed about your car." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture destroying its careful styling. "Jesus, Maya, you could buy my entire company 10 times over." "I don't want your company, Marcus," Maya said quietly. "I never did." "Then what do you want?" Vivian asked desperately. Her voice raw with genuine confusion. "Why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were poor? Why endure years of us treating you like a charity case?" Maya looked at each of them carefully, her gaze moving from face to face, seeing them clearly perhaps for the first time in years. "Because I wanted you to see me for who I am, not what I have. I wanted to know if you valued my choices or just my net worth. I wanted to see if any of you actually listened when I talked about my work, my impact, my purpose, or if you only cared about the price tag on my dress." The silence that followed was damning. Maya watched her family process the accusation, watched them mentally review years of conversations and interactions. Watched them realize they couldn't dispute what she'd said. "You all assumed that because I wasn't wealthy, or because you thought I wasn't wealthy, that I was failing," Maya continued, her voice steady. "That my life had less value. That I needed saving. That my choices were mistakes you had to tolerate or fix." Elizabeth reached for her daughter's hand. "We wanted better for you, you wanted your version of better," Maya interrupted, not unkindly but firmly. "Designer clothes and social capital ratings and the ability to brag to your friends about what your daughter does for a living. You wanted me to succeed in ways you could understand and measure and display." She paused. And when she spoke again, her voice was softer but no less clear. "Dad understood. He told me before he died, Maya, you'll know who truly loves you by who stays when you have nothing to offer them but yourself. He said I should never let fear of judgment prevent me from living according to my values. That the people who mattered would see my worth regardless of my bank account." Maya looked at each of them in turn. "You all failed that test. Every single one of you." Vivian was sobbing now, her hands covering her face, her interface completely dark as she lost control of her emotional regulation protocols. "How do we fix this? Maya, please. How do we fix this?" "I don't know if you can," Maya said honestly, and the words hit her family like physical blows. But you can start by asking yourselves why you only see my worth now that you know my net worth. Why my work only matters now that you know it's funded by hundreds of millions of dollars. Why my choices only deserve respect now that a billionaire has publicly validated them. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, then closed it, apparently realizing he had no defense. I'm not cutting you out, Maya added, seeing the panic in her mother's eyes. But things need to change. Real change. Not just because you know I have money now. Not just because you're embarrassed about how you treated me. Because you actually respect my choices and what I built and who I am. Her family nodded, humbled and ashamed, unable to meet her eyes. David materialized at Maya's elbow with 2 champagne glasses, his timing impeccable. He addressed her family with polite formality. May I steal her? We have some things to discuss. He didn't wait for permission, just guided Maya through the crowd toward the balcony where they'd talked earlier. The night air was cool against her heated skin, the city lights spreading below them like a circuit board. Maya accepted the champagne glass he offered, her hands trembling slightly. You okay? David asked, setting his own glass down on the balcony railing. Honestly? Maya laughed shakily. I don't know. You just blew up my entire life in front of 300 people and the internet. I know. He took both her hands, his warmth grounding her. I'm not sorry. I should be, probably. Jennifer would say I should be. But I'm not. David, let me finish, he said, his voice taking on a raw vulnerability she'd never heard before. Maya, I've watched you for 10 years. Watched you change lives with nothing but determination and compassion. Watched you stay true to yourself when everyone around you was telling you to be someone else. Watched you refuse luxury, refuse recognition, refuse me. His hands tightened on hers. I built a billion-dollar company, and I'm still not good enough for you. Not because of the money or the success or the social capital rating. But because you don't measure worth in dollars. You measure it in integrity. In impact. In how someone treats the least powerful person in the room. He stepped closer, close enough that his forehead almost touched hers, close enough that she could feel his breath against her lips. That's why I love you. Not because you're secretly wealthy, God, you kept that hidden specifically to avoid people like me. But because you're real. Because you see through all the bullshit that everyone else accepts as normal. Because you make me want to be better than I am. You are better, Maya whispered, her own defenses crumbling. You've always been good enough, David. That's not why I said no all those times. Then why? His voice was barely audible. She looked up at him, letting him see her vulnerability for once. Because I was afraid. You're this brilliant, driven, powerful man who built an empire from nothing. You could have anyone. Models with perfect social capital ratings. Executives who understand your world. People who wouldn't make you eat at taco trucks or get dirt under your fingernails or question whether success means what everyone says it means. Maya, and I'm just someone who teaches teenagers to grow vegetables, she continued, the words spilling out now. Someone who lives in a studio apartment and drives a car that sounds like it's dying. Someone who chose purpose over profit and community over status. Why would you want that? Why would you want me when you could have someone who fits your life? David cupped her face gently, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. You're not just anything. You're the woman who gave me everything without asking for anything in return. You're the woman who sees value in teaching teenagers to grow vegetables when everyone else sees wasted potential. You're the woman who's quietly changed more lives than I ever will, despite all my money and all my success. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Maya, you're not someone who would fit my life. You're someone who makes me want to change my life to fit yours. And that's everything. The air between them crackled with tension, electric and undeniable. They stood inches apart, his hands framing her face, her hands pressed against his chest where she could feel his heart hammering as hard as her own. "If I kiss you right now," David murmured, his eyes locked on hers, "everyone will see. There are cameras everywhere. This will be news. Your privacy will be even more compromised than it already is." "Is that okay?" Maya smiled slowly, seeing the irony. "You're asking permission now? You just announced your feelings to 300 people and broadcast my financial status to the world. That was business," he said, his lips curving slightly. "This is personal." "Then make it personal," Maya breathed. He kissed her like he'd been waiting years to do it, which of course he had. Not tentatively or carefully but deeply, passionately, like he was claiming something that should have been his all along. Maya's hand slid up to his neck, pulling him closer, tasting champagne and want and 10 years of denied chemistry. The kiss was hot and intense and full of everything they'd been holding back, and when they finally broke apart they were both breathing hard. Camera flashes erupted around them. The party guests who had migrated to the balcony or who could see through the glass walls were applauding, their interfaces recording every moment for posterity and social media. David's voice was rough when he spoke. "So is that a yes to the taco truck?" Maya laughed breathlessly, the sound unsteady but genuine. "Yes. But I'm driving. Your car is ridiculously flashy and probably has more computing power than my entire apartment building." "Deal," David said, grinning. "As long as you're there, I don't care if we walk." They stood together on the balcony for several minutes, ignoring the party behind them, just existing in the bubble of finally being honest with each other. Eventually the crowd's attention moved on to other dramas, and Maya felt like she could breathe again. Later, as the party wound down and guests began departing with promises to connect and transfer social capital, Elizabeth approached Maya alone. She'd removed her elegant gown's outer layer and looked somehow smaller without it, more human. The tears had dried but left tracks through her makeup. "Your father would be so proud of you," Elizabeth said quietly. The words hit Maya harder than expected. "He was proud of me before tonight, Mom." "That's the difference," Elizabeth nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "I know. And I'm ashamed. Maya, I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I'm not sure I could forgive me. But I want to try. Really try. To see you, not your bank account, not your choices compared to your siblings, just you. The person your father saw, that's all I've ever wanted." Maya said softly, Elizabeth's hands twisted together, uncertain. "Can I visit your garden sometime? Learn about what you do. Not to patronize you or to assuage my guilt, but because I realize I don't actually know what my daughter spends her time doing. And that's unforgivable." Maya softened slightly, seeing genuine contrition in her mother's face. "Yes. You can visit. But Mom, if you come, you're getting dirt under your nails. No designer clothes. No interfaces recording for social capital gains. No judgment. Just openness and willingness to actually see what I built." "I can do that," Elizabeth said, and then pulled Maya into a tight embrace. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For every dismissive comment. Every disappointed look, every time I chose embarrassment over support. I'm so sorry." Maya hugged her mother back, feeling 5 years of tension begin to ease slightly. Not gone, not fixed, but starting to shift towards something that might eventually heal. Vivian and Marcus hovered nearby, clearly wanting to approach but uncertain of their welcome. Maya looked at them over her mother's shoulder, seeing her siblings stripped of their usual confidence, their interfaces dark, their expensive clothes somehow looking less impressive. "I'm not cutting you out," Maya repeated, stepping back from Elizabeth. "But things need to change. Real change. Not performative. Not temporary. You need to actually examine why you treated me the way you did and whether you're capable of seeing value in choices that don't match your definition of success. They nodded, humbled and ashamed, like children being disciplined. But I'd like you to try, Maya added, surprising herself with the offer. If you actually want to understand what I do and why I do it, you're welcome to visit the garden. Help out. Get your hands dirty. See what real impact looks like when it's not filtered through social capital algorithms. Vivian wiped her eyes, her carefully applied makeup smudged beyond repair. I'd like that. Really? I want to understand. I want to see what Dad saw. Marcus nodded agreement, his usual bravado completely absent. Me too. And Maya, for what it's worth, I'm genuinely sorry. Not just because you have money, but because I didn't respect what you were building even when you tried to tell me. I didn't listen, no, Maya agreed quietly. You didn't. But maybe you will now. 3 weeks later, the community garden shimmered under morning sun, the vegetables growing in neat rows that testified to careful tending. Maya knelt in the soil demonstrating proper pruning techniques to her usual group of teenagers, but today the group was larger. Elizabeth Chen sat cross-legged on the ground in borrowed jeans and a plain t-shirt, her hands already dirty, her expression focused as she tried to follow Maya's instructions. She looked younger somehow, stripped of her usual armor of designer clothes and social capital performance. David was there too, his suit jacket abandoned, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were surprisingly muscular. A purple-haired teenager named Jasmine was teasing him about his tomato plants, which were admittedly struggling. Mr. Park, these look sad. Did you water them at all this week? I watered them, David protested, but he was smiling. Maybe I overwatered them, definitely overwatered, Jasmine confirmed. Rich people always overwater. They think more is better. Maya watched them interact, feeling something warm and unfamiliar settle in her chest. Her mother trying, genuinely trying, to understand. David fitting seamlessly into her world despite his billions and his interfaces and his empire. Her students thriving, teaching adults things those adults should have learned decades ago. Vivian and Marcus arrived around noon, still awkward but making an effort. Vivian had dressed down in expensive athleisure that was still too nice for garden work, but she'd come. Marcus brought his kids, 2 teenagers who looked horrified to be somewhere without climate control or entertainment interfaces. Where do we start? Vivian asked, looking lost. Maya handed her sister a trowel and pointed to a section that needed weeding. Start there. It's therapeutic. Destroys your manicure but clears your mind. Vivian knelt carefully, clearly uncomfortable, but she started pulling weeds. Marcus joined her after settling his kids with some basic tasks. They worked in silence for a while, the quiet broken only by bird calls and the teenagers' chatter. As the sun climbed higher, David caught Maya's hand, pulling her slightly away from the group. Happy, getting there? Maya admitted, squeezing his fingers. Thank you. For seeing me. For forcing me to be seen, always, he said, and kissed her temple with casual affection. Although I have a confession, another one? Maya raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? I've been buying vegetables from your garden for 3 years. Anonymously. Through online orders with very generous tips, Maya stared at him, pieces clicking into place. Those anonymous orders that kept the program running when we were almost out of funding. Guilty, David said, grinning with zero repentance. What can I say? I'm good at the long game. And your vegetables are excellent. You're impossible, you said that already. He pointed out. But you kissed me anyway. Multiple times, in fact, I'm starting to regret that decision, liar. She pulled him down for another kiss, softer this time but no less meaningful. Behind them, the teenagers cheered, and Jasmine shouted something about Maya finally getting some romance in her life. the garden thrived around them, a paradise carved from urban neglect through determination and vision and the willingness to get your hands dirty. A new sign had been installed near the entrance, carved wood instead of the old hand-painted version. It read, "Chin Community Garden where values grow." Maya looked at her family scattered across the garden plots, all of them trying in their own ways to bridge the gap years of misunderstanding had created. She looked at David, who had built an empire partly hoping she'd notice, who had waited 3 years because he believed she was worth waiting for. She looked at her students, teenagers learning that value could be measured in growth and community rather than credits and social capital ratings. Her family had thought she had nothing. Turns out she had everything. She'd just been measuring it differently, and the man she loved had understood that from the beginning. He'd just had to wait for her to be ready to accept what he was offering. Not money or status or social capital, though those came with the package. But partnership. Understanding. Someone who saw her clearly and loved what he saw. "What are you thinking?" David asked quietly, following her gaze across the garden. "That my father was right," Maya said. "That patience is its own kind of wisdom. That some things are worth waiting for." "Am I one of those things?" she smiled, turning to face him fully. "You're impossible and stubborn and you violated my privacy in front of 300 people. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes," Maya confirmed. "To all of it. The taco trucks and the foundation and whatever comes next. As long as you understand that I'm not changing. I'm still going to live modestly and get my hands dirty and value impact over image." "I'm counting on it," David said. "Someone has to keep me honest. Someone has to remind me what actually matters." In the background, Elizabeth laughed at something one of the teenagers said, the sound genuine and light. Vivian had dirt on her face and didn't seem to have noticed. Marcus was actually smiling, helping his kids plant seedlings with something approaching patience. Family was messy and complicated and sometimes painful. But it was also capable of growth, given the right conditions. Maya had spent 10 years planting seeds, not knowing whether any of them would take root. Now, finally, she could see the first green shoots pushing through the soil. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything.